All right. So first of all, welcome everyone. This is lecture 9 Q&A. So I wanted to start by apologizing. Lecture 9 was posted on the webpage very, very late. I will do my best not to make that happen again. Just a quick update on where we are in the course. So this coming Thursday, March 4th, is the due date of assignment number 2, the string module assignment. Next week, there will be a lecture as normal for Monday. For Wednesday, there is not a new lecture. Instead, on Wednesday is the midterm exam for this course. I will post a kind of list of covered topics, study guide, old exams, stuff like that this afternoon. So you'll be able to take a look at that. The general way that this is going to work, the midterm exam is going to cover through this week's lectures. In other words, today's lectures on testing and Wednesday's lecture on data structures are fair game for the midterm exam, but next week's Monday lecture is not. The exam itself will be given online in a tool called Gradescope. Many of you will have used that for another class. So the exam will be administered within Gradescope. You will have 1 hour to complete it. To accommodate students kind of all around the world and in different time zones and with different constraints on your schedule. You will be able to pick that 1 hour anytime between 10 a.m. Wednesday and 10 a.m. Eastern Thursday. So 24-hour block of time. You can take the exam during any consecutive 1 hour block within that 24-hour range of time. If that is not enough flexibility, if you can't make it during those 24 hours, please let us know early and we will figure out a way to accommodate you. We certainly want to be able to accommodate everyone given the weirdness of this semester. So those are the general, in general what's going on. So the midterm exam starts next Wednesday through Thursday. Within lecture 9 itself, from last fall, the timing was a little bit different, but it runs from 10 a.m. Eastern Wednesday through 10 a.m. Eastern Thursday. So now I am happy to take questions on testing, on any of last week's lectures, or anything additional. Oh, and I thought I would also mention next Monday's Q&A obviously will cover the Monday lecture, but also feel free to ask any questions from previous exams or any questions about the midterm, and I will schedule an additional Q&A on Tuesday, most likely Tuesday afternoon, just to mix up the times a little bit. So there will be an additional opportunity to ask questions about anything that's going to be on the exam on Tuesday. So that's it. What are your questions for now?
I had a question about testing specifically for assignments. So as we go forward and we need to design our own testing suites for our programs that we write, will we be given like sort of some ideas about corner cases that we might encounter, or like probable scenarios we should test, or will it be up to us to determine like what cases we should be testing?
The general answer is it's always going to be up to you looking at the specification. In some situations, we will, help you out a little bit. In some situations, your preceptors might say, hey, be sure to think about this. But in general, it is going to be up to you. And I think a good way of thinking about this is really to start going through the assignment specifications. And as you're doing that, do your best job of playing lawyer and thinking about, for each thing, that is listed in the assignment, how can you really, test the limits, test the corner cases, and things like that. So that would be my suggestion going forward.
Great, thank you.
I'll say that assignments 4 and 5 are the first assignments that will have explicit testing as part of the assignment requirements, where you're actually in assignment 4 writing invariant tests to test the structure that you're building. And in assignment 5, you'll be asked to write a whole suite of tests: boundary tests, stress tests, statement tests.
Yeah, so those two assignments are kind of explicitly about making sure you do a good job of testing, but in general, all of the assignments, we expect them to be correct. So we expect you to test them out as best you can.
Yeah, I have to say we're grading assignment 1 right now, so we can hopefully get it back to you, I think, tomorrow morning. And the fact is that in the process of grading the assignments, I found 4 different times that I've, said, looked at code and said, wait a minute, that's not always going to work. Oh, we didn't test this corner case, or we didn't test this boundary case. And I'm going to be adding 4 tests to the testing suite going forward, but this happens regularly. So it's really tough to do comprehensive testing, and anything you think of that, wasn't explicitly tested for, yes, it's a good idea to add that to your own testing suite.
Yeah, so in advanced computer science classes, there are some classes like COS 326 and COS 511 where you explicitly prove things about programs. In a very formal way, you prove that this bit of code satisfies that specification, and that's difficult, and you can't always do it. And in fact, provably, you can't always do it. And as Donna said, even coming up with test cases for reasonably simple programs can be super, super difficult. So this is your opportunity to get creative. It's your opportunity to really reason about what your program is and is not doing.
So a question on assignment 1, how will we be getting those back? Is it like code post like in 226 or?
Yeah, so it is being graded within CodePost. So you will get back, you can go into CodePost and you'll be able to get, tons and tons of comments. And this is, as in COS 126, we're emphasizing to the graders that, your job is not to produce the number, your job is to produce comments for students.
I had a question about symbolic constants, and in particular, I have a static function in A2 that returns a true false. And I was wondering, between defining a macro or using enum or defining a global variable for true false, what's the difference between all of those, and which one would be preferred in this case?
There are lots of ways that you can do it, and they all work, and they all produce a working program. returning 0 and 1 is, perhaps the simplest. Enums, pound defines, things like that, they are all, perfectly, valid ways of doing it. The way I would think of it, an enum is something that I think about when I'm thinking about a series of related values, sometimes but not always more than just 2, and then certainly more than just 1. And when I think of an enum, I automatically tend to think of, here is some list of conditions where the reason I have them all listed out in an enum is because somewhere in my code, I'm going to want to make sure that I handle all of them. So, for things like, I don't know, state machines, in some situations, an enum is kind of the perfect thing to use. Pound defines, in general, these aren't even seen by the C compiler, right? Pound defines are handled by the preprocessor. And the situations where you very often want to use them are when you have code that is being conditionally defined, and then you're testing within the code for an if-def. So this was part of the lecture. Or in general, when you want to kind of flexibly be able to change what that define is. You can, in fact, even change the value of a define on the compiler command line. So those are situations where you kind of, where a define is like the right tool for the job. Turning specifically to true false, there are, in fact, versions of C that have a Boolean type, and stuff like that. I think that pound defines are a fine way of doing it. I don't think that is the kind of most critical thing in terms of coding style. One variant of that we do want you to kind of pay attention to is when you're returning an exit status from main. So there are these exit success and exit failure macros that are defined, and you can return them. And one reason that it's kind of nice to use those for the return code from main is because they sort of have the opposite sense from traditional true and false. So when you're looking at C code, you're kind of hardwired to kind of think of some, you're hardwired to think of 0 as being something went wrong and non-zero as being, good, true. Whereas when you're returning from main, the convention is that a 0 return means the program succeeded, otherwise the program failed. Right. So that's one situation where I think we really do encourage you to use those particular macros. But in other situations, feel free to, define an enum that's, false or true, or I think that in most other situations, the clarity of the code isn't going to critically depend on that particular thing, just because in C we are so hardwired to 0 or null or anything like that is false, and anything non-zero is true.
So this is, again, more of like a midterm question, but how do you recommend studying for the midterm?
One good way is really just to look at previous year's exams. Now, one thing that you'll need to sort of pay attention to is that the course content has shifted as of about a year ago, I believe. Maybe it's just the fall. So the course content does tend to shift a little bit, and there is, there are different things that are emphasized in different semesters. This semester, for example, we are emphasizing Git a lot more than we did, a year ago. So pay attention, take a look at the previous year's exams. Always, if you look at something and it's like, what the heck is this? If you don't recognize something on the midterm exam, cross-reference the list of topics that we said were going to be on the exam, and make sure that this isn't something that has changed since last year. Other than that, I would say that obviously all of the material from lecture, precept, and the assignments is fair game for the exam. And so, look through the lecture notes, look through the precept notes, look through what you did on assignments 1 and 2, because all of the techniques that you used on those 2 assignments certainly are fair game for the midterm exam.
Where can the previous exams be found?
They will be posted along with the list of topics. I will get that out there this afternoon.
Thank you.
More questions?
I assume that the midterm will be closed book and closed note.
So the midterm is certainly closed book, closed internet, closed communication devices, stuff like that. So, think of it as just a good old in-class exam. I will ask you to write out and, sign the pledge and all that good stuff. All right, what other questions? And I should say that the midterm isn't really intended to be, recalling specific picky bits of knowledge and things like that. If we ask you to kind of, what does this complicated bit of gobbledygook involving lots of operators and whatever, what does that do? Then we will probably give you, a list of C operators with their precedence and associativity and stuff like that. So it's really not meant to be, how much do you remember? It's meant to be, do you know how to apply the concepts? All right, what other questions do you have? All right, so one more thing I just thought of. We were talking about kind of true, false, and 0 versus non-zero and null and things like that. On the assignment 2 specification, there is a section called using idioms. And it sort of talks about, how this implicit, 0 equals null equals false association tends to be used in C code that, real C programmers use. So for example, in the condition of while loops, often also in if statements and things like that, and often, even in things like return values. Now, return values very often have a much more specific meaning. So for example, in that using idioms section for assignment 2, the return value actually is a size t, it actually is a length. But very often, there will be a return meant to be interpreted as a true false. And in fact, that return will be the result of, an arithmetic statement or the result of a comparison or, something like that. All right, so last call. All right, thanks everyone, and see you Wednesday.